Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. So the previous Abyss cycle was one Abyssal Moon buff shorter than usual. So that means we have a premature new Abyss 12. And you know what that means? Another Abyss 12 video! Woohoo! So as usual, we're going to do a 4-star only run through both the top half and the bottom half of Abyss. And then I also did a day 1 speed run that I want to show you guys for this Abyss 12. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the speed run as well. Let's take a look at the builds that I use for the 4-star only run. The first team that I have set up for the top half of Abyss 12 is actually a Burgeon team. And it's going to be a very stock standard Burgeon team with Toma with a contained cross and the Flower of Paradise Lost with as much energy recharge and elemental mastery as he can get. Up next, we have the Water Boy Xingqiu, pretty much just energy recharge with a tiny bit of crit stats on a standard 4-piece emblem of Severed Fates. And after that, we have Yao Yao. Yao Yao will just help provide a little bit more Dendro application as well as healing. She's just on the instructor set because Yao Yao heals so freaking much. You don't need anything else but the instructor set on her. And we have Dendro Traveler. Dendro Traveler is going to be the main way to apply Dendro to the enemies for this team. Now up next, we have the second half team. And this team is a bit less free-to-play friendly overall because you need some pretty decent artifacts on Xiangling and Fischl. Then you guys are gonna, I think you guys will be fine as long as you have some decent artifacts and some constellations on these characters. But we have Xiangling Standard, the catch with the emblem set, and we also have Chevreuse. Now, full disclaimer, my Chevreuse is at Constellation 6, and that definitely does further improve this team's performance a bit, but I tried not to use her like, a Constellation 4 Chevreuse with unloading a bunch of elements, because I might have done that once or twice, but I don't remember. Then we have Fischl with the Stringless and the standard Golden Troop set. The artifacts are all pretty decent, but you guys can obviously use 5-star characters to replace these ones. Now, starting off, we have the Burgeon team. Now, Burgeon is actually very good in the top half because we pretty much have 2 adjacent enemies for most of this Abyss, and Burgeon's AoE just happens to be just large enough in order to deal with it. And we can see that Burgeon is just putting in a ton of work, and thanks to the shields provided by Toma, as well as the healing provided by Yao Yao, and finally, of course, Xingqiu's Water Swords, this team is also extremely durable and difficult to interrupt, so it actually feels pretty good to utilize, which is great. Now, I actually did put Dendro Traveler's Burst there on purpose right there in order for it to be large enough to hit the follow-up 2 enemies right there. And I'm really not sure how you can really group these things, but Burgeon thankfully has enough AoE in order to actually hit both the enemies there. You can see against those 2 giant construction robots initially, I kind of stood in between them at the beginning. I found that those ones, I know we're fighting these things right now, but those ones also meander about, and for some reason standing in the middle of them seemed to help a bit in terms of grouping them. But here we can see, even though these things resist Dendro, we're able to chew through their shields thanks to burning, as well as to do enough damage against these 2 to take him out with our Burgeon team. Now up next, we have the overloaded team with Chevreuse, Fischl, and Xiangling. Now, obviously, the snake is super annoying, but it has a couple attack patterns, and this is the attack pattern that you want, where it just ends up staying there like a giant worm stuck in the mud or something that's like, I don't even know how to describe this thing, but then it just flops over, and you can see that it basically ate an entire rotation's worth of damage, and I probably should have used Fischl's burst a lot sooner to do more damage there, but oh well. I was expecting it to not die anyway to this cycle, so here we go. Now it's going to do the crazy thing where it starts spinning around a whole bunch, or it should because it's under, I'm not sure if there's like an HP threshold for it, but yeah, it's going to do this thing. And pretty much this is just a bunch of nonsense RNG where you just got to try to hit each of the 4 nodes. Now fortunately, both Fischl and Xiangling just spam attacks, but once you hit the shiny 4 parts on its body, it's going to get knocked down, and you're going to be able to get a full free rotation on it. I think here I battery up my team a bit and try not to blow a bunch of bursts on it, and there we go, we took it out just fine. So, the next chamber is essentially just like 12-1-1. You have 2 waves of 2 enemies that spawn pretty close to each other, but not too close to each other. Now, I I think Kazuha and Venti have enough suction power in order to actually group these two enemies together. However, when I tried Sucrose, I didn't really have as much luck with grouping them together. But we can see here that they are kind of just grouping themselves up, or I'm not sure if Virgin was knocking them back a bit, if there's enough knockback on all this stuff to actually push them together. Really, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but it doesn't really matter that much because we can see once the Virgin's just going to explode all over the pets, and once you kill the pets, well, they just go into this crippled mode where they are just going to sit there and take a ton of damage. Now we have 2 more Pokemon trainers, but of course this is a different set of Pokemon trainers right here. Same stuff, do the rotation. Now one quick trick about if you run the exact same team that I'm running with Virgin, make sure to drop Dendro Traveler's Burst and make sure it contacts Chincho's water thing in order for it to absorb the water hydro version so it gets bigger and it doesn't explode if you touch it with Toma's Pyro application. So just keep that in mind. Now, this is the hardest part of this Abyss 12, which is the Setekh Wenut. This thing is atrocious, and it stays under the ground way more than the, the previous Ruin Serpent that we were dealing with. We can see that we got a decent attack pattern here where it burrows up from underground. You're able to get a little bit, and then it unburrows right next to you. I don't know which attack pattern you want to go for, but I think that this is the one you want to go for. And either way here, I think I kind of just wasted some resources, but oh well. In the end, we were still able to take it out pretty comfortably, and we can see that it unburrowed there. But this thing is just staying underground, and you just got to hope that, you know, you're nearby it when your abilities are just kind of going on and on. Now, this part is important. You have 2 main ways to deal with it. I brought an archer here, Fischl, in order to shoot the wind orbs out of the sky. We can see I thought I hit both, but basically you have to hit 2 wind orbs with any Petch swirlable element, and then you will knock it out of the sky where its resistances will actually be lowered. While it's just floating around in the sky, it actually has elevated resistances as well, just to be extra annoying. Like, they just had to design the most annoying boss that they possibly could, and they're like, okay, this is going to be it. It's going to be the Setekh Wenut, and we're going to throw it into the Abyss. The last thing that we're going to do when we fight that thing is Wenutting, right? We're going to be the opposite of Wenutting. Anyway, we have these 2 robots. I personally like to stay near the Gunner robot because the shield robot tends to approach you much more than the Gunner robot. However, you will knock them back a lot. Like, once they kind of get stun locked, they just start kind of wandering back. And you want to try to keep them in Dendro Traveler's burst radius. I think that this run, I didn't do as good of a job keeping the 2 of them together and keeping them in Dendro Traveler's burst radius. But I think against the second wave, I do a bit of a better job at accomplishing that, which you will see soon enough. Anyway, we take out the first wave, no problem. And we stay next to the Gunner robot, or I guess in this case, we don't stay next to the Gunner robot, and instead, we kind of push the shield robot backwards, which also works. Now, the shield robot also has a bit more health as well, so do keep that in mind when you try to distribute your damage. Now, here we can see that I go in between the robots, or I go on the other side of the robots and Dendro Traveler's burst to hopefully keep them in the burst radius for longer. But we can see, not a problem. We took care of them. Absolutely no issues at all. Now up next, we have the Aeon Blight Drake, and this is why an archer is great, not only just for the Setekh Wenut, but also for the Aeon Blight Drake. You see that we can just simply charge up 2 shots with the archer and then knock it out of the sky, and at which point it is literally a sitting duck, except it's a chicken, so I guess it's a sitting chicken. And here, I just, you know, this team, an Overloaded Chevreuse team, is going to absolutely maul a stationary target like this. We can see, oh my god, the damage on this thing. An all 4-star team dealing well over half the health of the Aeon Blight Drake is pretty impressive. It's great to see. You love to see it. And here we go. It's just rotation number 2. This should be just a clean 2 rotation of this thing now. Here I think I stayed in Fischl's burst for way too long, but whatever, who cares? It is what it is. So let's take a look at a quick speed run that I did. Day 1 speed run, literally did this in the first half an hour of trying this. And here we go. So we have this Abyss 12 when Neuvillette is perfectly designed for this. I decided to actually run with book tricks inspired by a CN strategy that I saw on Billy here. And Neuvillette's just doing Neuvillette things. Everything is just so lined up perfectly for him to deal with. It's almost as if this Abyss 12 was literally designed for his kid. And that's cool and all because, you know, Neuvillette is a lot of fun to use for this stuff. But here we can see we just book trick so that way we can swap faster off of Neuvillette as well as Kazuha. And it's also kind of funny to see kind of the difference between the real timer, which I added at the bottom, versus the book timer, like if we include versus the book Abyss clock timer, which is another metric for a lot of measuring how fast you did these runs. But anyway, it's literally basically the same strategy for all three chambers. You just use Neuvillette's E and then you laser them all down within the duration of a single elemental skill. Now, we clear 12-1-1 in 10 seconds according to the Abyss clock, 12-2-1 in 9 seconds, and 12-3-1 in 9 seconds, for a total of 28 seconds according to the Abyss clock timer. However, we can see that the real timer is reflecting 36 seconds and 33 frames, which is essentially over 8 seconds longer because of the book trick that we ended up utilizing. So it's kind of funny to see like the difference there between a book trick time with the Abyss clock as well as the real time measured with a real timer. So let's talk a little bit more about the enemies here. We have the large overgrown breachers, which I believe Venti's burst does have enough draw power to actually drag them together in comparison to, for example, like Sucrose or something. You're going to have a lot of trouble grouping them. But these things notably have a Dendro shield as well as resist Dendro damage. They have 50% Dendro resistance. However, as we saw, 50% is not like a huge amount because with the 30% shred from the Deepwood Memories, they get taken down to 20% Dendro resistance, which is actually quite viable for beating them with Dendro damage, as we clearly saw with the Burgeon team. Now, it's worth noting that when they have their Dendro shield, you do want to get rid of it, and in order to get rid of it, you can use a Numa or Uxie attack, which will instantly get rid of it. However, another approach is to obviously just use Pyro, and I guess it's actually affected by Hydro as well. Hydro will seem to break the Dendro shield on it, which is interesting, and Electro is actually the best element to break it. Speaking of Electro, we can see that Electro DPS characters will do well in the top half, and speaking of other teams that will work, I believe a Nilo, Bloom, Bountiful Core team will work pretty well because there will always be 2+ enemies next to you. Against the Pokemon trainers, you will have even more enemies next to you where the Bountiful Cores will absolutely demolish them. Hyper Raiden will do well in the top half as well. Raiden National will do well. Standard International will do well. I mean, pretty much just anything that can hit 2 targets pretty well is going to do just fine. And even single target DPS characters like Hu Tao, Yomi, etc., they can brute force through these 2 targets pretty effectively because ultimately you're just trying to do a bunch of damage to them. Okay, so the second half of Abyss 12, we should talk about, first of all, the Ruin Serpent. Ruin Serpent, of course, has 70% physical resistance. It is not a great matchup for physical DPS characters. So yeah, just keep that in mind. However, anything that's single target does pretty well against them. As you saw, Chevreuse overloaded with Xiangling and Fischl, especially the Fischl plus Xiangling combination. They're going to do extremely well against the Ruin Serpent as long as you just have some time to beat up on it. Now, in my opinion, I think the best advice I can give for it is to fish for, again, that AI RNG where it pokes out of the ground and stays there as its first attack. That is going to be the attack pattern that you want from it, in my opinion. Now, of course, we also saw the Ruin Serpent, again, just to reinforce. You just want to break the 4 shiny balls on it in order to knock it out of its crazy giant spinning phase. And a lot of RNG goes into that because of just, you know, you're just spamming attacks and it's spinning so fast. You obviously can't really control much in terms of what you hit. But we saw that, you know, it was fairly consistent with this team to knock it out of that mode. Second is the Setekh Wenut. As we saw, you just gotta, you know, follow it and get a few hits here and there. Now, try to battery up before it goes into its flying in the air phase. I don't know what triggers its flying in the air phase. It could be when it's under 50% HP, but I'm not entirely sure. It could also just be part of its attack pattern. And once it flies up in the air, you just want to apply a Petch element to 2 of the balls. You can also apply an element onto the Setekh Wenut and then swirl it, which will swirl it off of the Setekh Wenut into 1 or possibly even 2 of the balls to knock it out of the sky. Speaking of which though, bringing an archer will pretty much ensure that you are able to effectively knock it out of the sky. Speaking of knocking stuff out of the sky, well, we have another archer favorite fight with the Aeon Blight Drake. There's not that much to say about it, just knock it out of the sky. Oh, okay, there's one thing to say about it. It does, just like most robots, resist physical damage by a lot, so do keep that in mind when building your team for it. But we can see there that any type of single target DPS with an archer is going to tear through it like no other. So yeah, there you go. I actually don't think this Abyss is all that difficult because the HP values, as well as the fact that we just have essentially a bunch of punching bags that stand next to each other in the top half, makes this Abyss not too difficult to deal with. But at the same time, we are dealing with some of the most annoying enemies in the entire game in the second half of Abyss 12. I'm just surprised they didn't put the Golden Wolf Lord in 12.3.2 to make the absolute worst second half of Abyss 12 that you can possibly get in Genshin Impact. Maybe someday we're going to see them troll us like that, but for now, we have this current Abyss 12. And you know what? It was reasonably fun. I had a lot of fun with it. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments below. Let me know what teams you guys use to beat this Abyss 12 as well. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.